Mutants. This is Streebo here with you from Mutantville.com. Sorry, I had to get myself acclimated for a second there because I'm excited. I'm looking forward to talking to you about this topic, and that is boxing versus MMA. James Lights Out Toney versus Randy the Natural Couture. This fight is coming our way at the upcoming UFC 118. It's on the undercard of the lightweight championship fight that night between defending champion Frankie the Natural Edgar. Is he the natural? No, it's the answer. Excuse me. I mixed him up with Randy for a second there. Frankie the Answer Edgar versus BJ the Prodigy Penn. That's going to be a fantastic fight in its own right. But we have this amazing boxing versus MMA feud on the undercard. So I'm really looking forward to this. Now here you can see behind me I have this feud represented pictorially, as we have boxing represented by Oscar De La Hoya, who's now retired apparently, and Floyd Mayweather there in the background, versus MMA represented by UFC here with Dana White in the foreground. Mainly because Dana's become the mouthpiece for the UFC, not MMA as a whole, though tragically the UFC has come to represent MMA, mixed martial arts, in the minds of the casual fan, the hardcore martial arts or mixed martial arts enthusiast. But anyway, this is going to be a good fight, and it's very intriguing. Apparently, James Toney spent the better part of last year following Dana White around to various UFC events, and he kept talking to him behind the scenes, saying that he wanted to fight in the UFC. And Dana White eventually relented and he acquiesced, allowing Toney to come into the UFC on a multiple fight contract. No one's heard actually what he's supposed to make for those fights yet, but once the fight actually goes down, we'll all learn. But anyway, so Toney was brought in supposedly probably under a 3-fight contract, which is what the UFC seems to do. And right away, Randy Couture started lobbying, saying, hey, let me be the guy that welcomes James Toney into mixed martial arts. And now, I know there are a lot of people they're already just watching this video mad because they are mixed martial arts fans, or more than likely boxing fans, who think that this rivalry between boxing and mixed martial arts is something to actually exists, or that it should preoccupy one's time when arguing about, when it's just nonsense. I mean, there really is no feud between boxing and mixed martial arts, unless you're talking about pay-per-views going up head to head. Like, sure, yeah, sometimes the UFC is going to have a pay-per-view the same night as a big boxing event, but you know what? Boxing does that to itself on any given night. If there's a big pay-per-view going on, there will be other pay-per-views, surrounded around it. So, what difference does it make? Sometimes HBO goes up against Showtime, and that happens in boxing. So, we're not talking about the boxing versus boxing feud, but this is boxing versus mixed martial arts. Now, there was a time when boxing versus mixed martial arts was represented stylistically in the ring. Like, now there have been some classic kind of grappler versus striker, or no holds barred fighter or mixed martial arts fighter versus boxer fights in the past. The most notable in America, in the States, being when Judo Gene LaBelle fought Milo Savage. Now, there's actually, you can Google this, okay, probably find it on YouTube, but Judo Gene, who's the guy who's known for teaching Bruce Lee grappling, to introducing him to various wrestling and submission holds and what was basically parallel to shoot fighting at the time. And of course, he did a lot of judo work with Bruce. But anyway, Judo Gene versus Milo Savage. And it was pretty simple. Judo Gene just took him down and attained full mount. Savage rolled over. He got the rear naked choke. It went on for a little while. It took him a little bit to take him down. But, that's basically the way the fight unfolds. But what else has there been? Muhammad Ali versus Antonio Inoki, which Inoki tried to turn into a shoot on the night of the fight. According to Angelo Dundee, Muhammad Ali's trainer, and I don't know if he was his manager at one time or not, but anyway, they thought the Inoki fight was going to be fixed, and that it was just something where they were going to go in like professional wrestling and goof around. And Inoki went into it thinking, okay, I'm going to do something to Muhammad Ali and win this fight. And apparently I don't know, there was some bizarre rules involved because the fight wound up being just completely horrible. Inoki did what eventually became, he just laid on his back and kicked out Ali's legs. I mean, he basically did what was eventually called the Brazilian butt flop, but so named after a lot of jiu-jitsu artists who used to constantly pull guard by dropping to their back. Because they didn't have strong wrestling or judo takedown skills. But anyway, so Inoki does the Brazilian butt flop against Muhammad Ali for 15 boxing rounds. That's totally insane. I've tried to watch that fight, and it's horrendous. And then Ali starts actually round kicking Inoki's legs. He starts kicking him back. Ali jumps on the ropes at one point. It's a horrible, horrible moment. But anyway, Inoki tried to shoot on Ali for that one. And of course, Royce Gracie in UFC 1, where he fought the boxer Art Jimerson, who actually memorably came to the ring wearing one boxing glove and then one hand just taped up. I think it was just taped, yeah. So what can you say? And that fight was horrible too. Royce just takes the guy down, mounts him, and Jimerson taps out. He says, "Hey, I've had enough." But you know what? I mean, Jimerson basically went out without even throwing a punch. I mean, he couldn't even stop Royce from just taking him down with simple, jiu-jitsu takedowns. From tight clinches. That's not even like a wrestler's takedown where they shoot in explosively from long range. Those are a lot harder to fight off. But anyway, Royce choked Jimerson out in that. But Jimerson, he actually fought Don the Dragon Wilson in a boxing versus kickboxing match. So that's an interesting little aside for you there. But let's get back to it. James Toney, Randy Couture. Okay, now I'm going to try to talk sense about this, so I'm going to let the comments just come on this. Okay, so post what you like, but when people start acting stupid, I'm going to delete those, and if I delete your post, I'm going to ban you. But just so you're forewarned. But James Toney is actually one of my favorite boxers. I got into him late because I didn't start following boxing hardcore until the late 90s. I'd followed it casually, ever since the 80s, because I grew up in the last days of Muhammad Ali, in the heyday of Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, Thomas Hearns, Mike Tyson from beginning to end, Oscar De La Hoya, Julio Cesar Chavez. Now, I had never heard of Julio Cesar Chavez until I got in hardcore into boxing, years later. And I had to backtrack and learn about Whitaker and Chavez and those guys. Okay, but I knew Holyfield and Tyson, and the big heavyweight names, and even Oscar De La Hoya had floated outside to the mainstream. But I digress. I was into classic boxing before mainstream boxing, so I was following Muhammad Ali and all those guys and learning about that as much as I could. Here we are now, James Toney versus Randy Couture. Toney is a legitimate, at one time, middleweight champion, had some great wins over guys like Mike McCallum and, what was the other cat's name they knocked out to win the title? Anyway, it was a good one. Solid heavyweight. Iran Barkley, he knocked him out, not knocked him out, but had a fantastic fight with him. Toney's solid middleweight and went on to be a great super middleweight, great cruiserweight. Had an amazing, blistering battle with Vasily Girov in 2003. That's when Toney's career was resurrected. People had written him off for years, ever since he lost to Roy Jones. That was the only fight of his I had seen for years, mainly because I was a Roy fan, and Toney had kind of fallen into disfavor. But anyway, he comes back, reinvents himself as a cruiserweight, then a heavyweight. Okay, goes on to win the title, the heavyweight title from John Ruiz. Has the title stripped from him 1 week later for failing a test for steroids. Goes on to fight again for the title against Hasim Rahman. Gets a draw. So Toney, as early back as 2005, 2006, he was a legitimate heavyweight top contender. And here we have him fighting Randy Couture, who is, one of the all-time great mixed martial artists and probably most possessive of the most advanced ring intelligence in mixed martial arts. Okay, that might mean there are other fighters, but other better fighters, more athletically gifted, perhaps faster, stronger, whatever. But Randy Couture definitely has the most advanced ring intelligence. I'm going to have to break this video into two, I think, because I'm running out of time already. So I'm just going to wrap it up there. Toney is for real. He's a boxer. He's coming to fight Randy Couture, who is one of the great legendary mixed martial artists of our time. This is a throwback fight. It's styles versus styles. It's boxing versus wrestling. It's boxing versus mixed martial arts. It's Randy Couture versus James Lights Out Toney. Someone's going to get knocked out. It's going to be a great fight. I can't wait.